Well, ever since Yamaha's Tenere 700 came out back in 2019, late 2019 I think, all new platform, completely revamped, inline twin bike that had Yamaha's faithful frothing, it's fair to say. I think in a lot of ways that bike has been super successful. It's it's now celebrating its 40th year for Yamaha, which is really interesting. And a lot of celebrations going on in that. But always in the back of our minds, I think in the meantime, we had the Tenere 700 bike with an absolute gorgeous engine. It was really predictable. Yamaha got the fundamentals, the chassis, the geometry, everything right. It felt really good. There were a few shortcomings, and they were fuel range, only a 16-litre tank, and the suspension. Teneres back in the day, old ones, were woefully undersprung. The new revamp one that came out in 2019, good, well balanced, but if you took it off-road, it found its limitations pretty damn quickly. So I think as much as the Yamaha faithful embraced that Tenere, I think they also were probably saying to themselves, geez, it'd be good to have one with a bit more fuel range, because some of the previous ones had 20-something litre tanks, and something with a bit more suspension, just for a little bit more scope to be able to slam an erosion mount and not scrape guts on the ground out the other side of it. So lo and behold, recently, well, you probably would have heard about it, it's been announced, Yamaha's World Raid, Tenere 700. Released recently in Australia, where I think it actually clashed with one of our events, so we didn't have the opportunity to go to the Aussie launch. But we managed to get ourselves a couple of these, one in midnight blue and one in, midnight black and iconic blue. I think of these two models, and these are the two models that they're available in. So what are they? What is the World Raid? I want to keep wanting to call it World Rally for some reason, because it's obviously rally inspired. But what is this World Raid? Okay, so top line, and you can see the most obvious stuff is completely different fuel tank, different seat, different ergos, different look. It's got some different protective elements, some different suspension, which raises to 20 mil, different screen, pegs, steering damper, some electronics, and when I say that, actually just some connectivity and a USB. So there's a lot going on there, and all of that, if you compare that, remember when the Tenere first came out, I think it was about 17,500 ride away. Then I want to say currently it's just pretty much on 20,000 ride away. The World Raid, 25,500. So an extra 5.5K that gives you all of that. But let's have a think about it. Let's actually talk in a little bit more detail, because there's so much stuff to cover off on that I think Yamaha probably glossed over some of the things that we, after testing these bikes for a few weeks with a whole lot of different riders and all sorts of different terrain, I think they probably glossed over it a little bit. So let's start with the big stuff and the obvious stuff. Well, the visual stuff, right? So you've gone from a 16-litre tank now to basically it's a 23-litre tank. So, and I think they're calling it a split side-fitted tank. So center of gravity much lower. You've got actually two fills. I mean, sitting in the cockpit of this thing, it looks like a fighter pilot cockpit. It's kind of cool, right? You've got your steering damper there, a couple of these. It's probably, to be fair, it's actually sort of overkill a little bit. Very much a rally-inspired seat. So, compared to that old one, remember the old one that had the silhouette like this? It was almost like an Africa twin. It looked at really, really old school. So I love the look of this, but more than just the aesthetic, functionally, you can actually move around in the seat a lot more as well. So, and also when I say that Yamaha sort of undersold a little bit what they did, it's really interesting when you look at this. It's obviously the sort of same frame, the same engine in the guts of it, but you've got some of these die-cast aluminium hangers, and these actually, we stripped it down to understand how this was all put together, but they actually sort of like translate into, or they support these whole composite fiberglass pieces here. On this side, on the left-hand side, it includes a rectifier, but just there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. And the most important thing of which, and we've tested this, is that you get a lot more robust crash protection. So along with that, while we sort of talk about this one unit, there's a new radiator grille. They've made a huge amount of effort with some of the ducting here around the sides and the ducting here. So you get really good protection in the rain, but you're also not sitting on a with a crazy hot engine. Also, while we're talking ergos, new pegs, and that's something that sort of we've been saying for sort of a while. I think when we rode the Tenere, we sort of thought it was a little bit thick through the girth because of the wider pegs. It actually gives you such a much better purchase over the bike, I guess, and allows you to grip it and get your legs in the right angle, and you don't have to ride bow-legged. So, you know, that's a really, really big thing. What else from an ergo's perspective? Well, let's also talk, the screen. I think that compared to the standard Tenere, we've got another 15mm on the screen. Still not the biggest screen for a touring bike, you know, so you do get buffeted around a little bit, but not bad. They've actually added these kind of cool little, these really couple of easy to remove, so, but that just, you know, creates a little bit more of a capsule. And, you know, we've done some time on the freeway and it's actually, you know, not too bad. Probably the biggest change, you'd have to say, in terms of performance, would have to be the suspension though. So, you know, you still got the same, it's still a Kayaba 43mm fork, so they haven't moved up to what the motocross or enduro bikes have with a 48mm, but they have beefed them up substantially. So first of all, you get 20mm more travel at both ends, so now you've got 230 millimeters, about to say kilometers there, millimeters of travel at either end, so that's an extra 20. That buys you some more ground clearance. We're up to sort of 250mm ground clearance. But what it's done is, you know, just up-spec the componentry. So not only is it lighter, it's much more robust, and obviously when you've got more fuel, you're going to have that, particularly with the fork. But you've got a whole lot of preload options, more damping options, much firmer settings, and also better bottoming resistance. Basically, it ramps up a lot more. We found very much the same on the shock, which again sort of uses the initial shock. I think if we're reading the specs correctly, I think they've actually not only changed the reservoir and the setup of it also, but I think the linkage ratio a little bit as well. So again, you know, ramping it up. I know there is a new bump stop in that, and we felt that a couple of times today too. So, you know, I think they've done a bloody good job of balancing that and making it a lot firmer. So anyone who jumps off an old Tenere will immediately feel a, you know, quantum leap in this thing's ability when you're jumping off bits and pieces. So what else? I think, you know, we talked a little bit about protection before, in and around the cockpit here too, but obviously now we've got a 3-piece aluminium bash plate, you know, which really sort of beefs up the protection, and we, you know, you certainly use that. In terms of a few of the bits and pieces, you know, it's a very comfortable bike. Most people would get on the thing just like, wow, you know, it's probably traditionally a little bit higher bar than the average, which makes it great in the standing position. You know, nothing really good, actually really good, seeing these aren't a throwaway item like they are, you know, with enduro bikes, just where they come out for ADR purposes. Mirrors are a really important thing, so particularly when you're on the road a lot of the time. So, you know, they were really good. Grips. Jesus, Yamaha, when are you gonna, you know, what's this thing about hard grips? Like, same with all the, you know, motocross and enduro bikes, hard grips. Like, give me some comfort, you know, not a biggie. One little gripe for me though, while we're sitting here looking, is this little wheel here. So, you know, the one thing with the ABS is you have to basically, it's a bugger because every time you switch it off or turn the key off, you've got to reset your ABS and your mates are waiting on you in the corner. So that's, you know, it's a ball ache, let's be fair about it. But the other thing that I think I was almost a little bit concerned about is this wheel, because you actually scroll through everything with this wheel and then you push it in. So that's fine when you stop, but when you're on the freeway and you've got to take, and you do that and you're bumping like that, it's actually really difficult. So I would really implore that Yamaha think very strongly about putting this on the left-hand side where, you know, you can actually use the thing much more functionally. As I said, great riding position, really strong over the bike. You know, because that's lower, you haven't got a seat, you can move back and forth in the saddle a lot more. What would be kind of cool to see, and look how big those raises are. You know, what would be cool is just sort of seeing if we had another hole in the triple clamp there, just like a lot of bikes, you know, so you've got that adjustability. The Olin steering damper, pretty cool unit, you know, that it's not ashamed of itself sitting up there, is it? So really cool, like sits on these little alloy towers. Again, like, you know, when you look at the bike, in a lot of ways it's kind of like over-designed in a little bit. It's like Yamaha hasn't said, hey, how are we going to make sure we can, say, strip weight out of that thing? And I believe it's put on about 16 kilos relative to, you know, the standard Tenere, which you'd expect obviously with a bigger fuel tank. So yeah, with the Olin steering damper, you've got 18 different settings, so it's kind of cool to play around with that. Not a huge difference between, you know, 18's a lot of clicks on the thing, but, you know, I think just a little bit with a bigger tank there, just sort of helping you more inclined to take this thing off-road. take a little bit of weight off your arms on those long trips. That's just a really nice option to have there. Also, there's, I haven't mucked around with it too much, but there's some extra connectivity. So with the TFT screen, 5-inch screen now, and also with the combination of the USB, which sort of sits here, we've got just a quad lock plugged in. You know, that gives you the option of seeing some of the messages on your phone, etc., up on your screen, which is just a real convenience. So probably what I should have mentioned earlier is like there's only, you know, the bikes are in stock trim. The only thing we've changed, they've gone to a Pirelli Scorpion Rally tyre, not the SDR. Comes out with the SDR, slightly more road going. So we've gone to those at both ends on both machines, running about 24, 25 PSI in them, which is good for both road and off-road. And also the standard handguards are full wrap, but they're plastic and they're more of a wind deflector. So just in the interest of making the thing a bit more robust and matching the sort of protection you have down here, the Yamaha Motor Australia guys fitted a bunch of Polysport, a couple of Polysport ones to these bikes as well. So it's been fantastic, having these bikes over a few weeks, putting them in the hands of a whole lot of different riders, different abilities, sizes, preferences, and reasons for riding, has been a really interesting experience. We've taken through a whole lot of different terrain. So you want to hand over now and, give you, let a few of those people give their insights into what they thought about this all new Tenere World Raid.
Full disclosure, I'm a Yamaha fan, always have been. Got a shed full of them, and I had the 660 Tenere 2010 model. Great bike. I did a trip to Fink and back across the Simpson Desert. A number of trips closer around here. I ended up selling it because it just wasn't as exciting as I wanted it to be. I preferred the extra power of the enduro bike 450 that I've got, the WR. But I was really impressed, and it was great to see. And I mean, when I first saw that Yamaha was bringing out that the 700, I thought, what a great idea. And it needed some horsepower and some suspension. And this is what what I rode today was awesome. I really enjoyed it. It's exciting bike to ride. The 660, my old one, was just too much of a trail bike. This thing goes on the road, on the highway, you cruise along really nicely, and in the bush too. I was surprised. The power was super linear. I thought could be a bit of a handful on the trails, but it wasn't. Easy to ride. Suspension was very forgiving. Really enjoyed it.
Alright, what a bike. Tenere 700 was really cool a couple of years ago to ride the standard bike, but to be able to jump on this World Raid edition was something else. With the main things I felt about this bike was up-spec suspension. The standard model was great, but it suffered a little bit with suspension. This bike is a hell of a lot better. And if you're someone like me that's coming off a dirt bike onto an adventure bike, you're kind of looking for that similar kind of vibe with suspension, and this is pretty damn good. You can jump it, you can hit things a lot harder, and it'll hold up a lot stronger. Other main thing I really love about this bike is the engine. It's the smoothest, nicest, just most beautiful to ride engine I've ever ridden. I've ridden other adventure bikes with all the gadgets, with all the different modes where you can move the power around, restrict the power, but this, to me, you don't need it at all. What you do with your hand translates directly to the rear wheel, so you can be down a gear, absolutely revving it off its head in the rev range, and the thing's an absolute rocket. Super lively, super playful. Or what I was doing when I was getting tired was clicking it up a gear and lugging it around, and it had enough go to be able to pull that higher gear, no worries, and it was a totally different animal. It felt like it had about half the power, really easy to manage, and you could go all day at that pace. So overall, super happy with this bike. We've done a bunch of Ks on it. I've been lucky enough to get out for a few different adventure rides with a few different friends. It's awesome to get their opinion on it. Bike's super comfortable for the long Ks. That seat they've got on it's really, really good. So if you're like me and you're coming off in a dirt bike and you're really interested in seeing what this adventure world's all about, this bike's really cool. So get out there and have a go yourself.
So the riding experience, right? For me, well, first of all, there weren't any surprises with the engine. You know, it's an absolute peach of an engine. Something about it, that real characteristic sound. I think it's a product of that, 270-degree crankshaft, uneven firing, inline twin, the crossplane, the CP2 crossplane engine as they call it, which as soon as you start it turns heads, right? But it's something about the controllability of the torque on that. The off-road just makes this thing, just sing and so easy to dial on. And I think also justifies, Yamaha, whether you think it's a marketing line that no gimmicks with the electronics, or whether you think it's an excuse for not having electronics. Either way, it gives any kind of crew who go like, dude, this thing I can dial on, do what I want. Who needs traction control? Who needs changes in throttle response? So, yeah, and you know what? I would agree with that. So look, just sort of taking through really, I guess, sort of top line. Compared to the Tenere, for me, much nicer looking silhouette, much better to sit on, much stronger stance on the bike. Felt like sort of slightly higher bars, but I think, and it also felt narrower, but I think that had a lot to do with being, you can really sort of use your ankles against the frame here. So really nice riding position, and nice to be able to move back. It's almost like, you can lock yourself in back here, so it's nice that you can do some downhill bits and pieces. So, as we said when we tested the Tenere, the last time, I think it was about 18 months ago, the suspension on the standard Tenere 700 had its shortcomings when you went off-road. Like really impressive, really balanced on the road. When you're going on gravel tracks and corrugations and bits and pieces, cool, like fantastic. And for 95% of people, that's all you need. But you try and blast these things off erosion mounds, and increasingly that's what people are doing. Australia's known for treating their adventure bikes not like at the touring end of the spectrum, but really as enduro bikes, and expect them to blow off erosion mounds and deal with it, right? You've got a 200-kilo bike. So, look, it hasn't got cone valve suspension, so it's not like something like a KTM 890 where you're going from a standard Explorer into a cone valve, which is like a $5,000 fork. The differential is not that big from the standard Tenere to the World Raid, but it is noticeable. So you can charge a lot harder. You'll see with some of the footage we were jumping off erosion mounds and stuff, you're trying to not pop it and land flat, but sort of push your trajectory that way. But I think pretty confidence inspiring. Nice to have some little bit of extra, external rebound. Preload, I should say, spring preload. On the rear, same thing, much more robust, pretty well balanced, but I think when you start pushing this, and you do find limits on both ends of these things, the rear finds it first. Really nice to have, you just got a little sort of hand dial, basically with spring preload. I think you've got about 15 turns. We used all of them. So that'll give you an idea that, particularly if you've got a weight or a pillion on the back, it'll give you an idea. So probably if anything, it's a little sort of soft on the arse, or more inclined to bottom on the arse end. There is a bump stop in there that makes that better. And interestingly enough, when you wind all that preload up, it really doesn't come at any expense in its, over those sort of chattery bumps and the corrugations. Normally when you throw a bunch of preload on, you lose that tractability over that sort of stuff. So that was a cool thing for me. So like, sweet engine combined with better suspension, for me made, and suddenly you've gone from, 16 litres, which is about just over 300 fuel range, to 23 litres if you want to fill it up with about a 500 kilometre fuel range. That's a really big thing, and I think, almost in the tradition of Tenere was to have, hey, we've got a bike that can go a long way. I guess the other contentious issue is, you're talking about 25.5 grand for this bike now. You talk to some Yamaha dealers, and some people might put some crash bars and maybe a pipe on or whatever. So quite often it's up around 27, 28 or something that when it rolls out of the showroom, which is getting up to around the sort of, the KTMs, the Husqvarnas, the sort of up-spec, Desert X Ducatis of the world. So And I guess the contentious issue that sort of splits opinion is that these things also come with no electronics. So the ABS, yes, I mean, okay, on the standard Tenere you have on-off, very fundamental and you know, I think probably a little outdated. The World Raid's come out with a 3 system, so basically full ABS on, then off-road ABS where you have, you know, some intervention on the front, but nothing on the rear, and then full off for more experienced riders. It is a ball ache to have to stop and do that. You can't do it on the fly, you know. I don't know if there's a workaround on that, but it's just, you know, it's annoying. It's as simple as that. But the ABS system in itself, you know, is really good. In terms of the electronic intervention on the traction control side, I was thinking today, this engine has, you know, it's inbuilt, right? So, and I think people are right in saying that, yeah, it's for an engine with this much power, sort of 70 ponies compared to sort of some of those bikes putting about 100, 105 ponies, the 900cc models. You know, if this was a 900, yeah, I think I would sort of go for that. But look, I think if you have to wrap up, if you're a Tenere guy and or girl, and you know, you want a better suspension and greater fuel range, you know, paying an extra $5.5 grand with all the extras you get for that, you know, I think that the World Raid is an absolute no-brainer. You know, I'd love to see them bring out something in between with a a Tenere with beefed up suspension, etc. So, but look, it's a bloody good thing. You know, it's there are a few little quibbles that we got about, you know, some of this. You know, I think the brake pedal could, you know, do with a 2-decade upgrade. Few little bits and pieces like that, but I think Yamaha's done a bloody good job on it. They've taken that predictable, hard to fault platform, given it fuel range, given it some more off-road chops, made it look a whole lot better, and given a lot more crash proof and off-road cred. So, you know, this thing you can take to the corners of the earth now, and yeah, it's a good looking rooster too. I think, you know, the silhouette for me, that change as well has made a big difference. One thing I forgot to mention, a little bit cramped, I think, just from the, you know, from the peg to seat height. But a really, really comfortable seat. And I spent literally most of my time standing on this thing actually, because it's just so fun to throw around in off-road. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what Yamaha does. They've always railed against convention. They won't bring out a 350 in the motocross or enduro scene. So we're talking about it before, so they'll stick to their guns. You know, they've got a 1200. Do they just stick with the 700 and 1200, or are they going to be lured into that 900? I love to think that they would be, but you know, in the meantime, if you're a Tenere fan, you know, this thing's bloody good. And I think, you know, everybody's upping the ante now with expectations in terms of what adventure bike can do off-road, certainly in the Australian market. And you know, it's been great to see that World Raid can actually deliver on that.